Well, welcome to the next episode of the Christ-Centered Cosmic Civilization, and we're thinking about alchemy, still on our way to getting to chemistry. It's interesting, before we plunge into the subject again, a little bit more of the history. It's interesting that Queen Elizabeth I of England, she lived from 1533 to 1603. There was a guy called John Dee, and she gave him a license to perform alchemy. So in the 16th century, in the time of when you've got sort of the Protestant Reformation happening around in Europe, there is this alchemical view of the universe is controversial in the sense that some were opposing it. But it's interesting, like Elizabeth I licensed at least one alchemist. And then Prague was considered to be the kind of metropolis of alchemy at that time in the 16th century. And the two consecutive emperors, Maximilian II, who lived from 1564 to or he's emperor anyway, 1564 to 76. And then Rudolph II, who's his immediate successor, who's the emperor from 1576 to 1612. Both of them hosted alchemists and tried to gather them together in Prague because they were the emperors of the Holy Roman Empire. And so right at the heart of the Holy Roman Emperor of that empire at that time, you've got this kind of desire to sponsor alchemy, this alchemical, because we, like a modern person would go, why would they be bothering with a ludicrous view of the universe? Didn't they want science? But remember that they do want that. They do want a true understanding of the universe. And therefore, they wanted to pull together. They were pulling the alchemists together because they wanted to know what is the universe really like and how can we progress in science and technology. It's all part of a desire for that was happening. So that's interesting. We won't. I've done too much history in some ways, and there's been complaints about it. Too much history of alchemy, but I find it fascinating. Let me go. Let's push. We can probably have PJ for one more episode now, because his voice is giving out a little bit, but. Let's get into the business of alchemy now. What it was for, what could be done with it. Why there was this obsession of turning lead to gold. People, if they know about alchemy, they know that. Oh, why did they want to turn? Is it just because they wanted to make money? Before you answer that, because that's to me some of the most important and fascinating of all. We've thought quite a lot about the salt, sulfur, mercury, heavenly, but there's also these four others that you've mentioned: fire, water, light, and air. First of all, let's just talk to us about how come there are 3 heavenly, 4 earthly, 7 in total. These numbers feel like they've got biblical significance. What do you want to tell us about that?
Well, absolutely. You've got, so I mean, the spirit is sevenfold, and then, so that, like, the prophets talk about the sevenfold nature of the spirit, but then you also you see it when Moses represents a spirit with the candlestick that is sevenfold, and then has 7 lamps that get created later that the spirit uses. So that's quite an interesting thing that the lampstand uses, like a created thing. So we think the furniture, and we've talked about this a bit before when we've talked about the archangels, but it's worth mentioning again, just because it's like the spirit particularly likes using creation, using creatures as well. for whatever reason. But then, like, right at the start of the spirit's kind of how the spirit likes to flow the spirit out, we see these 7 lamps, and we've thought before how they are the 7 holy archangels represented. Philo says this. But we see it as well in Revelation. Jesus says the 7 angels are the 7 lamps. And so we see that. So the spirit is tied to creation in quite a deep way, almost as if the spirit doesn't manifest apart from creatures and creation in some way. Obviously, we see times that rule's broken, at the baptism and so on, but where the spirit's physical body is seen, it's the language Luke uses is quite incredible. So even though spirit does have a body, she never uses it. The spirit always uses creation for some reason. So there is an idea that the sevenfoldness of the spirit then we should expect to see in creation in some way. So that's quite a key thing.
Yeah, the spirit is like in the tabernacle, the 7 branches. The spirit, as if the spirit hovering over creation at the very beginning gives life to all things. This sevenfoldness has a deep connection to the very structure of the universe, and thinking then that if there are these 3 heavenly elements, the salt, sulfur, mercury, or as a modern physicist or might say, bosons, quarks, and leptons, they might say. But we know, ultimately in the heaven, right at the center of the highest heaven, there are the 3, the Father, Son, and Spirit. So if we want the really sort of fundamental explanation for the heavens and the earth is found in the 3, the Father, Son, and Spirit. And then in this view of the universe, there's this another 3. There's an echo of a 3 that the salt, sulfur, mercury, or whatever. The idea of mass,
motion,
and energy. That's it. Mass, motion, and energy. All of but I find it fascinating that there's the divine throne, the emperor. There's the throne on which the Father, Son, and Spirit are there, manifested in Revelation. The Son, the Father, and the Son, and there's that Spirit manifested in a sevenfold way, and so on. But there's the 3. But immediately around them are these 4 living creatures, and the 4 living creatures are occur in the book of Daniel. Ezekiel is my favourite kind of account and presentation of the 4 living creatures, each of whom has 4 faces. 4 living creatures with 4 faces. So you've got the 3 at the very centre of reality, surrounded by 4 living creatures, each of whom has 4 faces. So the number 4 seems to be immediately around the 3 who are the Father, Son, and Spirit, the 4 living creatures that have these 4 faces, and the 4 faces are like human, lion, eagle, and ox or cherub. Yeah. And that's kind of representing the earth and its creatures and so on. But that's interesting, isn't it? In the Bible, there's the 3 and then the 4. And in this sort of alchemical view of the universe, there are the 3 heavenly substances, and then there's 4. And the 4 are fire, water, light, and air. Now, sometimes people think about elements, and they'll sometimes think of the elements as earth, water, and fire. But in that one, light is earth. What's going on there? What would you say about that? Let's think about it at the end. You're saying that in the classic alchemical view, it's fire, water, light, and air. But sometimes when people think about these elements, they'll go fire, water, earth and air, but earth and light seem to be interchangeable in these different ways of thinking about the earthly elements or substances. Why is that? Who's behind that?
Bardaisan is the one who gives us
Bardaisan, it's him again.
We do love him.
Yeah, and it isn't just to help us. Doesn't he live in Edessa? Is it? Yeah. Where's Edessa?
Edessa today is in Turkey. Historically, it was considered to be a part of either Arabia or Syria. It was ruled over by the Arab Abgarian kings.
Abgar. Okay, look, we're going to have to do a full episode on this. So we're thinking about that area of Syria, really. So if in the modern world today, you'd be thinking of Syria.
Yeah.
Right. That's enough. Don't start on Bardaisan because it's so huge. But what does Bardaisan say then? Why is light and earth interchangeable for Bardaisan?
So he says in the Bible, the heaviest thing. So when people talk about earth as an element, they say, oh, it's like heaviness. It's stuff that wants to go like, They say the heaviest stuff, this is something Aristotle says, heaviest stuff is the stuff that wants to go down. So the earth beneath your feet is the heavy stuff. Whereas Bardaisan says, no, when you read the Bible, the heaviest stuff is above you, not below you. So the light that we see in all the heavens and everything, that is heavy. And so he gives that argument from scripture. And few, like other sort of people take it up and everything, but alchemists know it.
Yeah. And that is true, isn't it? Because in the Bible, glory is the light shining, the light his light pouring out. So Jesus in the Transfiguration, where they see his glory, and they see all this light pouring out. The Hebrew word, people often know this, kabod, means weightiness. The heaviness of glory. I think C.S. Lewis wrote a book called The Weight of Glory, because glory and light in the Bible is the heaviest thing, and that the universe as a whole, its heaviness comes from its light.
And then the Bible, when it talks about like grass and dust and stuff like that, it's not as like heavy, permanent stuff at all. The Bible talks about the earth as something very passing.
Yeah, that's true. That we go, oh no, the earth is very heavy and substantial. The Bible's like, no, it isn't. It's incredibly insubstantial and flimsy and has no solidity, and that even mountains shift and move when the divine glory is manifested, because the divine light is so heavy it just like brushes aside things as flimsy as rocks and kind of what we would say as earth. And as you say, like literally dust just like blows away in the wind, and the Bible says that this stuff just blows away in the wind. Whereas light can't be blown away or something. It's this heavy thing. And just, isn't that interesting, the upside downness of the universe? Aristotle, with his, like, we're really not happy at all with him. Always trying to simplify things down to just some one spherical substance kind of thing. But he's always like, yeah, the heaviest, most substantial stuff is downwards, and we would shudder. We're like, oh dude, like down is bad, like you like the underworld of hell and stuff. Like it's as if he's yearning to go down into hell. Whereas like, of course, Bardaisan's like, whoa, no, honestly, like flip all that around, you're totally heading in the wrong direction. What is weighty and substantial is heavenly, and the highest heaven is extremely weighty. Because it's full of light. So brilliant. So fire, water, light, and air. And let's change our understanding of light as not something insubstantial, but something that is heavy, weighty, something that has arises because it's heavy. And we're like, what? Yeah, it's a totally different way of thinking. Brilliant. So those are the 7 substances, a 3 and a 4, heavenly, divine, earthly, 3 and 4. Now, what's this thing about a 5th element? What's that? Because you can see there was a film made about trying to find a 5th element. Do alchemists want to find a 5th element? And what is that? that word? What is that word? Quintessence. Tell us about that.
So there is something that people kind of notice, that when you put these fundamental things together, there seems to be stuff more than the sum of the parts in a way. And so then it's like, well, there's a reality to these things. There's a complex construct will do more than just the small things will. How do we explain that? How do we describe the moreness of complexity? And that is basically quintessence, that there is like something constructed, and it's also seen as magic. C.S. Lewis understood magic to be like larger structures doing things that couldn't be understood simply from the simpler parts. So that when you put together two things, you've got, it'll be like if you mix like water and oil, and if you could mix it together, now it just like, it does nuclear explosions, or something like neither other one could. That's kind of like what magic is. And so there's a sense in which the universe is supposed to constantly be doing more than the sum of its parts, and like God's wanting us to, and the way God has set things up, and he promised that he's given us like the 7 sacraments, where like he promises, all right, you do this, something more than the sum of its parts will happen, like marriage. And everyone knows in marriage, even non-Christians can do that, and they know there's more than just chemicals going off. There's more than marriage is more than that, but the other sacraments are like that as well. So he's given us those promises. It's like, kind of in C.S. Lewis's words, like magic will happen.
Yeah, and we even just not wanting to distract too much, but when we think about a sacramental view of reality, we will say if we combine like flour and water and things like this to make bread, and we combine other like grape juice and go put them through a process and things like that, and we end up with bread and wine, and then handle them in a particular way. He's like saying, oh yeah, something really incredible. I will encounter you, and you will can feast upon me and participate in the divine nature, participate in the very body and blood of Christ. And all of that way of thinking, that physical things have a kind of capacity for ultimate reality, even in the form of sacraments, as we'll talk. And Christians have this kind of, like he's educating us almost. Whenever we take Holy Communion, for example, we're being educated that physical things, if used correctly, have, and in his way and in his blessing, have this capacity to convey infinitely more than we ever realize. And that he's saying, well, like, I want you to have a kind of sacramental view of reality itself, that if things are combined and used rightly, there's a massive capacity to share in his life and enjoy this adventure with him in the universe.
And we've thought as well, because like the Bible does, we think about the magi, so they do magic in a very good way, and they look at the stars moving, and they don't just see balls of gas, they see them combining and a new one appearing and all of this in such a way that means something new than just the sum of its parts. And because they believe in magic, and in a proper way, because the archmage Daniel had taught them proper magic, it brings them to Christ. But of course there are, and we've thought about in our very first one in this series we were doing, the kind of like wrong sorts of magic. And then how, again, like the Bible talks about like, drugs, and when you use them, you could do necromancy and all those evil magics. And then we think, no, it's just a chemical. It just does this. And we could just explain it that way. But I was like, you say that to yourself and everything. But in fact, this is what you can do with it. Like, it doesn't make sense with just the sense of its part. There is like a fifth element.
Right.
Beyond just chemicals, beyond just, these parts of your brains linking up and everything.
So what the idea is, the fifth element then in this sense is this desire to combine fire, water, light and air. And the idea is if we can combine those, there is a way of combining them together such that you end up with this fifth thing that is a perfect combination of the four. And that thing, that fifth element, the perfectly combined grouping or mixing or harmonization of the four, that fifth element is almost like that is what the new creation will be. It's like saying, if all the earthly things can be woven together in a perfect way, that word quintessence, it's like that is perfection. It's the quest for perfection and to bind together what we have in such a way that it's perfect. And that the idea, because the concept of the fifth element really is that the earthly things become all that they can be. It's this idea that if you have this fifth element, you can have immortality, like the philosopher's stone is the fifth element, a perfectly combined. Although that tends to be the heavenly elements, the philosopher's stone. Actually, just tell us about the philosopher's stone, because when I was reading lots of alchemical texts, this desire to produce, sometimes it's called the precious stone, sometimes it's called the stone that is not a stone. But it's come to be understood as the philosopher's stone, or really the stone that is the embodiment of wisdom. Like, I came across a great quote that says, alchemy is the finding of wisdom. There's a great quotation from one of the books that just said, alchemy is the philosophy, the finding of wisdom. So this idea of the philosopher's stone, it's like, it's a stone that embodies wisdom. And wisdom there is how to use, like the difference between wisdom and knowledge. Like knowledge is mere information. Wisdom is what to do with that kind of idea. So that the alchemist is after that, not a mere description of here's the structure of reality, but it's rather, now what can we do with it? And the idea of the philosopher's stone, and Isaac Newton wanted one and he was working at them, is to have something that's this perfect. What is the philosopher's stone?
So one of the key things it does, as we were talking before about like the earthly elements and the heavenly principles. So one of the things that the earthly elements need, like the earthly elements need heavenly principles in them to make them do anything. So as we thought about, like the ancient conception of it and our modern conception, without those fundamental particles, you can't like move, you can't have mass, you can't have any release of energy. So like you can only do anything. So as we're thinking, like when we get earthly things to do what they're supposed to do, they can only do anything if they have that spirit, Hylasa, when you put it together, it's spirit. So you can't just have dead things and just keep working at dead things till it becomes a perfect dead thing. It won't be able to do anything. It won't be any good. And so one of the interesting rules about the Philosopher's Stone is in order to make one, you need a pure Christian heart. Because there's a sense in which your spirit is sick. It's out of alignment. You don't have, the perfect combination of stuff or whatever. And Jesus cures that. But if you were to think, I'll just try and perfect my earthly elements while you have spirit sickness, so you would be then conforming your earthly elements to something that's sick, so it will just get sick all over again. So it's a very key thing. Like one of the first rules of that, you got to have a pure Christian heart to begin with, or else you're not going to make it.
So your inner life must be pure, and then you can then purify your outer life. But if you're merely trying to get immortality on the outer life, but your inner life or your unseen life is unaligned, chaotic, and so not Christ-like, it's a futile cause. And I did come across that in quite a few of the ancient and medieval alchemical texts, where some of them don't even try for immortality. I noticed that in the Indian alchemical text, it's this futile. You cannot arrive at it because there's the idea that it's almost like they can't imagine. One commentator said, we cannot imagine so correcting everything. So they said the best we can hope for is to just alleviate diseases. But you can't arrive at immortality. Because I guess the idea was there is no way to fix the inner and the outer.
And loads of Christian alchemists, like Zosimus and so on, say that Hermes, the kind of human Hermes, was Enoch, and that...
Enoch, because Enoch's often considered to be an alchemical thing, yes.
Yeah.
Right, Enoch. Okay, brilliant. Go on.
So then there is that, and obviously he's a very Christ-like guy, and that's why the confusion happens. Same way people got confused about Paul. But there's that idea, and so when he has antediluvian knowledge, really it has to be through Enoch or Noah that you get this. And so he does attain earthly or physical immortality, but he does so having first walked with Christ all his life.
So he walks with God and attains the inner harmony, perfection, fully Christ-like. And then he is also then able, or God allows him to transmute his outer flesh, and so he becomes like a glorified man and is therefore taken up into the heavenly realms, as is Elijah. Elijah's another one who is allowed to do such a thing. So then in the Elijah story, because he goes through this process of purification in his own life with fire and so on, and the elements when he goes to Horeb, and there's the and fire and all these things. That's an alchemical process almost. But whatever is the case there, Elijah then is also absorbed up. So Enoch is, and he's transmuted into a heavenly form, and and then is it not also because in the Enoch there's a lot about angels being transmuted, like joining with earthly women and producing these kind of heroic, not in a good way, but these giant offspring. And that again is a kind of alchemical idea, because that comes up in alchemical texts, this idea of the Nephilim, and these giant people who are a combination of angelic and human and produce this wondrous other thing. And it's not a good thing, but it is an example of a transmutation.
Yeah, and also of the chaos that they embrace.
Yes, go on.
Yeah, they abandon their station. And so we thought as well before about angels marrying and everything, because we thought about Tolkien's theory that there are, the archangels might be happily married with lots of kids and so on. But they abandon their stations to have earthly women. So they do mix together. It is this Levitical thing we see as well, isn't it? Where like the chaos before creation is just everything all jumbled up together. And they're rejumbling things in a key way. And there's a bit in Enoch, and it's also in Jubilees, where like God kind of doesn't quite know what to do with the spirits of Nephilim, because it's like he's made a prison for the spirits that abandon their stations, and then he's made this other prison for human spirits. And so he's like, well, what do I do with Nephish spirits, because they don't fit in either group? And so he allows them to become evil spirits that will tempt people to bring out this sin for the sake of salvation. So so he gives them that. And one thing I quite like about it is God leaning towards salvation as his like go-to. So he's like, oh, we can find a way that these people can be saved and help other people be saved. We'll use that solution instead. That's always how he likes doing things. And
that means that in the Gospels there are things like unclean spirits. That's not demons, but this category of like the spirits of the okay.
Nephilim.
I've heard people saying that the unclean spirits in the Gospels are the Nephilim spirits that are roaming around doing mischief. Yeah.
Yeah, but then specifically for that purpose, that so that people don't hide sins in their heart, they will bring it out, and then if they bring it out, Jesus can deal with it.
Right. So they kind of force people to manifest the rottenness that's inside them, so then it can be confronted.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a thought. Now then, as we come to the end of this period, let's do the lead to gold business. Why do alchemists want to turn lead to gold? What's that about? Because they're both similar weights. They seem heavy, and they're not that different to each other in one sense, but they're totally different in another. What's going on?
So we see gold all throughout heaven. So, like, as we thought about Bardaisan, so when he was trying to understand the nature of things, he looks to the Bible first. So he doesn't assume, like some of the ancient Greeks do, that earth is the weighty thing. He's like, no, it has to be light because the Bible says so. And then we see gold, this heaviest substance, or one of the heaviest, is up there in heaven. And that's key to his argument, that it's like, yeah, this super heavy thing is everywhere in heaven. Quite rare to find down here. So it's a heavenly substance. It exists in a realm in which Hylaster does. But it is an earthly element, isn't it? Or it's created of earthly elements, gold, it seems to be. Obviously, it has some mercury because it is obviously a metallic thing, but in loads of other ways, it does seem to be basically of the same stuff we are. But it's totally happy, and God's totally happy having lots and lots of gold in heaven. So there's that sense in which it is like it is an example of something that its earthly elements are aligned, and it has the inspiration of having a Hylaster, accordance with Hylaster, that makes it an acceptable substance in the highest heavens.
So the idea then is gold is something that is like an earthly thing that is hugely present in the highest heaven. And in the descriptions, like Ezekiel and Revelation, there's just tons of gold, and the streets are paved with gold and all that sort of thing. And the idea then is that in our fallen condition, we are like lead. It's like lead is fallen gold in this view of things. So the two things seem to weigh the same and have a similar kind of softness or whatever. Like they're not very, very hard metals and things, and they kind of have a superficial similarity. And yet one is considered base, and the other is considered like noble and heavenly. And the idea then is it's like we have become lead, but we were destined to be gold. And so the goal of transforming lead into gold is not so much a way of making money. That would be very silly, really. I mean, what's the point of that? It's rather the ability to transform something that is base to something that is heavenly, has a heavenly home.
And one thing to notice about it has properties of the three heavenly principles. So it's more mercurial, like you can mold gold in your hand, isn't it? You see people scrape off bits so easily. So it is more mercurial. It's more like mercury. It's used in computing and so on. So it has this ability that has
electromagnetism.
Yeah. So it is like that. And then obviously it can have this power in it. So it's more like the heavenly substance. It's like how the Bible says we'll have heavenly bodies. So we'll still have our bodies, but then it will be made heavenly. It will be given Hylaster added into the mix.
So it's like gold has the mass, motion, energy, dimensions. Lead is used to seal things and block things, isn't it? You put lead can surround radioactive things to prevent light release, whereas gold is more about release. So I think, as you're saying, this like the Philosopher's Stone is the transformation of your body to be from mortal to immortal is really, that's what the lead to gold's about. Lead to gold is just this kind of example to say, if the alchemist knows how to do that, lead to gold, that is a very simple experiment that would indicate that the alchemist could also transform a mortal body to an immortal body. But most importantly, the purification of the inner spirit lies behind, because you can't do any of those things unless your body, your spirit, is truly redeemed and purified. So the truly redeemed, sanctified person is the person who's like Enoch and Elijah in the Bible, are then able to, are permitted to, transmute mortal bodies into immortal bodies. And then a kind of easy to see manifestation of that would be changing lead to gold. It's like the lead to gold is like, yeah, you could do that, but like that is a simple experiment that is really about immortality and redemption and new creation. And we're waiting like for Christ to come, the ultimate alchemist, the true thrice blessed one, who will perform this transmutation on the whole of the heavens and the earth and bring about resurrection. And the whole creation is yearning to be set free from its bondage to decay and be brought into its quintessence, its full alignment, and everything to be properly aligned and all separations to be perfectly done and maintained. Christ, the true and ultimate divine alchemist, the transmuter, transformer, redeemer, resurrector, new birther, all of that he can do. So as we come to the end of this, and we're going to ask, PJ's voice is giving out. I can. Is there anything more to say, or should we save it for our Bardaisan episode?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, we'll do that, and let me leave you. Let's all have this thought, because we might have in these 3 episodes felt, what's going on? This is really weird. I've never thought like this before, and I don't think any of it's true. And I'm happy with the Aristotelian view of the universe, or I think modern science is that's enough for me, a sort of just flat materialism. And yeah, okay, whatever. If it's too much for you to cope with, or it's unhelpful to you, that's fine. But do take from this point that we've ended with, why Christians for thousands of years have been interested in this is this yearning for new creation, new birth, to put off the old humanity and put on the new humanity, to put to death the deeds of the body, that which tends to death, and to put on the life of Christ, to die to sin and live to righteousness, to sanctification, heading to glorification and immortality and resurrection. That passion. Now, you have to be into that if you're a Christian. You might say, I can't cope with all this alchemy stuff that's weird or superstitious. It's whatever. If you can't, that's fine. You don't have to have that. But what you do have to have is this thing that or our Christian alchemists and everything were really longing for. And that is this transmutation, transformation, redemption. That's what they're after, the redemption of us and the whole creation.